Hey everybody, I know this one is coming out a bit later than I like to get these out after matches, but for a game like this, I didn't want to miss the opportunity, and I guess it's better late than never. Because I wasn't going to skip one where I finally, and I mean finally, get to talk about goals after what felt like way too long. So let's get into it, the 5 headlines from Barcelona's 4-0 win over Real Betis. Headline 1 is things clicking early. There is something for Barcelona, at least usually in recent seasons, about playing Real Betis, where especially at home, Barcelona seems to want to play a certain way, and Real Betis seem to want to let them play that way. Of course, it probably didn't hurt that Xavi got to basically have his Gala 11, Sans Dembélé, who returned from injury in the second half. And unfortunately, Betis have been and will be for the remainder of the season without Nabil Fekir. But they were also missing a number of important players and even starters along that back line. And that's when they began the game with 11v11. And I think all that added up to Barcelona being able to play the way that Xavi wanted them to play. We even saw from the opening jump Lewandowski getting involved in the match early and Betis giving him a lot of space to drop in on the left side, creating those numerical overloads with Balde and Gavi. And with the return of Busquets into the lineup, that also meant that Busquets and Pedri both shaded to the right so that Koundé could get farther forward, which in turn allowed Raphinha to curl inside on those runs that we'll get to in a second. I'll talk about the effects of all that later on, but the blanket statement I can use is that it's a reminder that even the best of Raphinha can only come when all the players that Xavi needs to prop up his system are available, which includes a healthy Pedri and Busquets. And there were a bunch of moments in that first half that reminded me of that fact. In the 21st minute, De Jong on a surging run forward that we would not have seen him do against Rayo Vallecano, who, by the way, got destroyed by Elche, that being the team that are at the bottom of the Liga table, 4-0 at the same time that the Barcelona game was going on. Oddly enough, making history by beating and losing to the two teams in the table with the largest point variance in history. So that's a great job by, I guess, all three teams involved for the week's results, but what are you going to do? That's football. But oh yeah, De Jong, we'll talk about him. He doesn't make that run or several of the runs into the box that he made in the second half if he's the lone pivot and doesn't feel like he has the proper coverage behind. And like what has been the case with all of those pivot / other controller next to a pivot performances that we see from De Jong sometimes in the same week. Like today, it's just food for thought at this point. I'm not sure what the answer is, and that's something we'll talk about on the podcast. Headline 2 is a perfect return. It cannot be understated how interesting it was to see Xavi's back line, which was with Andreas Christensen back looking fully healthy, and comparing that with the Real Betis back line that looked like they had just met before the match. Xavi preferred for Balde, Christensen, Araujo, and Koundé back together again after way too long, and that unit, it made it a perfect return for Christensen as he managed his first goal in a Barcelona uniform. It starts from a corner kick, bounces around for a while before finding its way out to Raphinha. Raphinha delivers that left-footed cross in, and Christensen was left wide open right in the middle. Christensen also using the attention that Araujo gets to serve as his shadow. But what made Christensen's performance so impressive wasn't necessarily the goal. Again, that was a cherry on top. But having him return just made this back line look so much stronger. In 1v1 matchups, Christensen adds a support to Araujo that he just doesn't get from Alonso. And having Koundé on the right side instead of in the center with Araujo means that you're not really losing anything at that right back spot either. And it also, as I said, Real Betis kind of played into their hands because I already mentioned Koundé was able to push farther forward with Busquets and Pedri supporting. That also meant that Araujo was able to hand the ball off to Busquets or De Jong or Pedri in build-up and not have to be exposed in the ways that he was against Rayo Vallecano, because you did see in the early going that Real Betis was testing Barcelona a bit with the ball at the back and building out of the back, and they quickly broke through that within the first 5 to 8 minutes of the game. The issue with Barcelona, however, was the fact that they seemed to not be pressing as a unit very much today. And that's why this game got a bit wild in the middle there, because it seems like individuals were pressing more than the units, and were they marking zones, were they marking people? Fortunately for Barcelona, I think both these teams were kind of screwy in that regard today. And things got even screwier with headline 3, which is flipped on its head by a red. Of course, this whole game can be summed up, at least from the 33rd, 34th minute on, by the second yellow that was handed out, that red card to Edgar Rodriguez. And it was a moment that changed the game, of course. You could see Joaquin, before he came in the game, going nuts about it, but it was the right call. It was clumsy by Edgar, coming down on Pedri's foot, and it's tough. You can get ejected without a red card caliber tackle. Instead, it's a yellow card. And it was a yellow card on the first tackle and the second tackle, hence the double yellow. It feels unfair because it's still the first half of a close game, but that was a letter of the law, and he should have been sent off. And as should be the case when you're at home in front of 90,000 people, that raid changed the entire complexion of the match, and in a good way. Barcelona was already focused on being vertical, almost to a fault when it was 11-11. Betis would have had their chances if the red doesn't come, but instead, only moments after the red, Barca score again. Immediately after a red, a team can be quite discombobulated, and that's exactly what Betis were. And good on Barcelona for exploiting that, and finally finding and picking out a weakness that the other team may have had, and we're showing you wide open. Because the very next attacking action by Barca, there's a lot more space on the wings for them, and a lot more space for Raphinha to come inside. Barcelona had a numerical overload on the right, Pedri and Gavi and Raphinha. Pedri pushed it to Gavi, who plays the nice through ball to Koundé, who was overlapping, as I've mentioned now 3 times, who does well to find Lewandowski, and he scores number 19 in the Liga by taking advantage of a back line with one less center back for at least the time being. It was gutsy for Pellegrini after that goal was scored not to immediately try to sub on, well, he didn't actually have any other center backs on the bench, but somebody, including the change that he made at halftime, to try to stop some of the bleeding, but he didn't do that. He waited till half, which, again, with the third goal, that meant that it was a little bit too late. Once it was 3-0, it really did feel like in the second half like that game was over. And that third goal was scored just minutes after the second one. It's brilliant from Lewandowski on the sideline. He gets through 2. Busquets in with too much time and space to pick out a pass, and Raphinha gets rewarded for his curling run in behind the back line. A run that I wish we saw Barca connect a bit more on. It was almost deemed offside, but after a long VAR check, they give the goal, and that means Raphinha got both a goal and an assist in the game and winds up getting both his goals and assist contributions to the double-digit marks in the Liga this season. Not too shabby. Again, I'm not saying this facetiously, but not too shabby for a player that has not played his best to still have double-digit goal and assist contributions. That's, again, pretty good for how poorly his first season at the Camp Nou has been. Headline 4 is a little shine for Joaquin and Ansu. 2 different ends of the age spectrum. We'll get to the extremes of that with our 5th headline, of course. But in the case of Joaquin first, he was able to enter the game with, again, the game probably already over, but his team was able to find some footing there to start the second half, finally settling into a 4-3-2 to defend and tried to play as narrow as possible, even forcing a 53rd minute save by Ter Stegen, which he had to do well on, or else that game could have been a bit interesting. 3-1, at that point it would have been 10 men against 11, so who knows what would have happened with Real Betis getting a goal and maybe taking back a little momentum, but as has been the case with the Liga this season, Ter Stegen said absolutely not, and they moved on, as the game again at that moment felt completely over. So the subs entering the game, again, the breath kind of being taken out of the game as well. And it was Joaquin who arrived from the Betis bench at the ripe old age of 41 and deserved the applause he got at the Camp Nou. I was just dipping my toe in the Liga back in 2000 when he made his debut, and boy, yeah, that does make me feel old. I saw a poll on Twitter about were you closer in age to Joaquin and Lamine Yamal. Of course, I'm quite a bit closer to Joaquin, yet it still felt like, man, this guy has been around a while. That means that I've been around at the same time too. But again, I was still a young player while Joaquin was already an adult enough to make a first team debut. So that tells you that, yeah, he's even got a few years on me. He's been a legend in the Liga, and it's a shame that he went to Valencia at all. When Ronald Koeman was in charge, I covered the fact that Joaquin and Ronald Koeman were as much of water and oil as you could possibly get, and that did not do anything good for either of those two men's career in the time that they overlapped and spent together. So good that Joaquin found his way after a trip at Malaga back to Betis, where he made 2 different sets of 200-plus appearances for Betis to start and end his career. So pretty storybook there for him. And Joaquin, I feel like he'll still be around the game for a while, but this certainly, I hope it's not the way he goes out, going off with that injury, putting Real Betis down to 9 men for the remainder of that game. Fortunately for Barcelona, that meant that they were able to sub some guys out. I mean, Pedri also got to come out in the 73rd minute alongside Raphinha, but this time around didn't have to feel like he was getting yanked too early, so he makes way with the applause to Dembele, who gets an ovation for his return as well. So again, a lot of just good vibes at the Camp Nou on the day. But that also meant that Ansu Fati, who came on as a sub earlier, even more so against 9 men when Joaquin left injured, he got to do a little bit of that, showcasing what he can do in space and when he's feeling confident. And it was much, much more space than he usually does have. And so I'm glad that we were able to see just a literal glimmer of hope from Ansu Fati. Of course, on that 4th goal too, being the architect of it, Ansu Fati, who actually made his debut against Real Betis, gets that goal, who got that goal way back as a 16-year-old in 2019. Instead, he doesn't get another goal. He picks up a not actually counted assist, but yeah, for Kool-Aid, we'll give him a little bit of an assist there on the old goal from Guido. He was lively in that game, and it was great to see. Is it possibly something to build on? I'm not so sure about that, but at least in that moment, in the moments for Real Betis in a 4-0 win, it was real positive signs for Ansu Fati. And headline 5 is teenage history. The substitute that, of course, has to get all the shine. The one that we have to talk about is the one that makes history, and that's Lamine Yamal coming on in the last 10 minutes or so to close out that game. And as I mentioned last week, I'll give you the history lesson again here. He's the youngest player ever to debut for Barca's first team, beating the record of Armand Martinez Saji, who was 15 years and 11 months when he debuted in 1922. 101 years that record stood. Again, 1922 is prior to La Liga being created, as La Liga was started in 1929. So, of course, that goes without saying that Lamine Yamal is not only Barcelona's youngest debut ever in their first team history, of course, in an official match, because it predated La Liga. They had the Catalan Cup, or the Catalan National Championship at the time. But obviously in La Liga, it is Barcelona's youngest debut as well, beating out, well, again, Paulinho Alcantara was before that, 1913, but as well as Vicente Martinez, also predating La Liga, and Ansu Fati. Ansu Fati was the prior holder of that record of the youngest debut in the Liga for any Barcelona player. And if Lamine Yamal does somehow get a goal in however many games he gets still called up to the first team, because I'm not sure if he's going to be going back down now or then, because Juvenal just were crowned champions with the win today. So I'm not sure if Lamine Yamal even needs to go back to the U19 level. And since he's already here, there's no reason for him to incorporate into Barca Athletic either. So I could see Xavi continuing to call him up, throwing him on a little bit more, and seeing if they can make a little more history. Because it almost happened in this game. It was absolutely perfect timing to bring him on against a 9-man Betis team at home in front of 90,000 people who were going to support him, who were in a good mood, and thankfully the kid didn't disappoint. He almost got a goal, of course, a slip from the Betis defender, and he was in on goal. And Rui Silva comes out to meet him, and Lewandowski wanted the ball squared to him. And I bet he kind of said, "Welcome to the first team, kid, but also, I am Robert Lewandowski. Don't you forget my name." And it was good to see that Lamine Yamal, and whatever was said in that moment, didn't deter him too much, because he almost got an assist as well, finding Dembele, who was onside. That ball over the top, and Dembele looking to square to Lewandowski as well. Maybe Lewandowski got in Dembele's ear as well. But either way, Lewandowski did get his 19th goal. Lamine Yamal got his debut. Barcelona got a 4-0 win at home. And they, most importantly, I didn't even mention it, got 3 points. They stay 11 points atop of the table with very few games remaining on the schedule. Just about a month left of the Liga season. So it'll be an exciting one down the stretch. I hope you'll stay with me here, where Barcelona should, and I say should, be lifting the Liga trophy before too long. So again, I hope you're with me on that journey. And until then, as always, Forza Barca.